to part 2 of the History Things podcast, 156th anniversary coverage of the Battle of Monocacy Junction. This is an Instagram exclusive, so we thank you all for getting off the podcast apps and hanging out with us here on Instagram. We are here to talk about the July 9th, 1864 Battle of Monocacy Junction, and we are arriving now at the opening moments of the battle. We are here today on the Best Farm at Monocacy National Battlefield, which at the time it was known as the Best Farm because the family of John Best, a tenant farmer family, was operating the property here. And during the battle, the Best family, like many of the citizens locally that were, experiencing the warfare being waged here, affected by it. They were seeking refuge wherever they could. So John Best is actually going to ride out this battle in his basement shelter as all hell broke loose around him. Behind us, in the background, you'll see cars from time to time, is modern-day 355 or Rockville Pike. It's a huge thoroughfare that stretches all the way down from the edges of Washington, D.C., straight up through all the way here in Frederick County. So it's a very long thoroughfare. During the American Civil War, it went by the Georgetown Pike. So we are now here at the early morning hours of July 9th, 1864. Matt, walk us through the action that sort of takes place in the fields and road right behind us here.
Sure. Now, July 9th, 1864, we'd actually had some skirmishing a little earlier in the morning. About 2.5 miles to the northeast of us from here, we had some fighting around 6 a.m. at Jug Bridge. Modern-day Route 144 crosses the Monocacy at the old Jug Bridge. Now, what had happened is that we had Confederate troops coming out of Frederick, Lily's brigade. They're going to run into a couple of regiments of Ohio National Guard. And
so this is before Rhodes shows up. So we have
Correct.
Lily's brigade making the first contact
Yes.
with Federals over by the Jug Bridge. Very cool.
Yep. Those Confederate forces are going to run into these Ohio National Guardsmen, and those Ohio boys, 100 Days men, they're going to put up a heck of a fight.
That's a theme during the Battle of Monocacy Junction. You'll hear us say this several times, that these Federal boys who aren't expected to put up a hell of a fight.
Right. Now, the Confederates, they're not looking for a fight here. They're trying to get to Washington, so they're trying to move as quickly as possible. When they run into that resistance up near Jug Bridge, they are going to decide to shift south to, again, what is modern-day 355, the old Georgetown Pike, at around 8 o'clock in the morning.
Remember, Jubal Early is not expecting anything remotely strong in the way of resistance here. His intelligence, as you could say it at the time, has at best 100 Days men, militia, men who haven't experienced the real grit and danger of a hard, violent Civil War battle. So he's expecting to literally roll through here with almost just a kind of get-off-the-shoulder mentality. That is not going to be the case at all.
Right. And out here amongst the fields of the Best Farm are about 300 Federal skirmishers. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the bulk of the Federal forces under Wallace are actually beyond the Monocacy River, utilizing the high ground to cover the bridges and crossing points on the Monocacy, specifically the wooden covered bridge and the iron railroad bridge.
Lew Wallace is no dummy. He's got a natural defense in front of him. He's got Monocacy River, which is helping to separate his men. There's only two real easy ways across, the bridge, the covered bridge, and the railroad bridge. And there's pretty significant high ground for him to place the little bit of artillery that he does have online.
Correct. Now, again, around 8 o'clock in the morning, these Confederate infantry are moving out of Frederick, Maryland, moving south down the Georgetown Pike, and they're going to run into this thin skirmish line of Federal troops, made up primarily of the 1st Maryland Potomac Home Brigade, the 9th New York Heavy Artillery, and the 10th Vermont Infantry, companies of them. They're not the full regiments. So 300 men total, commanded by a captain from the 1st Maryland Potomac Home Brigade, Captain Brown. Now, as these Confederates are advancing towards his men, Brown is going to order them not to fire. He doesn't know who's coming his way. It's dusty, it's hot. The troops moving towards him are grimy. He can't really tell who they are.
This is problematic for the skirmishers because these skirmishers, some of them at least, are veterans. They know exactly what's coming.
Exactly. And they're actually asking to be allowed to fire in some cases. But he will have his men hold their fire until he himself is fired upon, at which point he recognizes that he is out of his depth. And he is going to turn over command to a young lieutenant by the name, of George Davis of the 10th Vermont Infantry.
So essentially what just went down is the ranking commander was in charge until it got very, very real. And then he was like, I actually have no clue what I'm doing. here, somebody with experience, anybody with experience, and it's this young lieutenant
Right.
that gets the baton handed to him to sort of organize the skirmish action at the beginning phases of this battle.
That's exactly right. And Davis is going to do a good job, and we're going to hear from him again later. Now, over the course of the morning, these Union skirmishers are going to be slowly driven back across these fields through the Best Farm itself and fall back into the railroad cut of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. They're going to be using this cut like a trench. Now, the Confederates, they're advancing primarily with their skirmishers and their sharpshooters. We have some dedicated sharpshooter battalions out here. We also have some excellent use of the Confederates' numeric advantage in artillery.
Absolutely.
And as these Federal troops are going to be falling back, the guns, the Confederate guns, will be advancing southward as well. That's why we actually have multiple cannon emplacements here on Monocacy Battlefield. Some of the guns even in the yard of Best Farm, showing the movement throughout the day.
During the times of year when the corn stalks are low in the fields around us here, you can actually see the movement of one of the Confederate positions, because they have a position very far out into this field here, and then you can see right where they come to, because just out of frame to our right, as Matt just referenced, right here in the front yard of the Best Farm,
right,
we do have a couple of symbolically placed guns to sort of show the position of the Confederate artillery as it went from, its initial placement to coming up and filling this, former federally occupied skirmish position.
Right. Now, these Confederate skirmishers and sharpshooters, they're not going to have it completely their way, though. Yes, they're driving back this Federal line, but they're going to actually get into a barn here on the Best property at one point, and that barn is going to become a great target for the Union artillery, who will eventually burn that structure down from the fire.
Yeah, so if you do visit the modern-day battlefield here today, you will not actually see this property. It often gets confused for the big 1790 barn at the back of the Best Farm property, the one that sort of butts right up to modern-day Interstate 270.
Right.
The barn that we're talking about, if you're familiar with the battlefield or not, if you're coming here for the first time, when you come to the beautiful Best Farm property, you're going to have to come down this really long driveway here. It's gravel. It's going to make a lot of cool dust and crunchy gravelly sounds that everybody likes when they drive. But as you come to this big sweeping turn that sort of changes your your position, and you're now driving right towards the house, as soon as you make this turn, there is a massive picturesque tree sort of sitting right in the elbow of this turn, and it's roughly this area of the battlefield where this barn that we're talking about was. And Union artillery from across the Monocacy River is going to shell it, light it on fire, and that barn will disappear.
Yes, it will. Now, as this has been happening, because this Federal resistance has been going on throughout the morning of July 9th. Okay, so things kick off at around 8:30, and it's going to go for much of the morning. Those skirmishers being slowly driven back, them then holding the line around the Baltimore and Ohio the Baltimore and Ohio railroad cut. Excuse me. This is taking too long. The Confederates are not looking for a fight. They need to get through here. They want to keep pushing on towards Washington. And so at around 11 to 11:30 in the morning, they're going to begin looking for other options.
I got to imagine at this point, Jubal Early is kind of going crazy on the battlefield, right?
Right, if he was here.
Oh,
Jubal Early's not on the field.
That's right.
He's actually back in Frederick, ransoming the town. He's going to make a demand for $200,000 of the citizens of Frederick. In modern monies, that's about $3.5 million. So that's a big chunk of change.
So let's just go over this real quick. Hagerstown was ransomed for roughly how much?
$20,000.
$20,000. Middletown was ransomed for roughly how much?
$5,000, but they only got $1,200.
Right. So, modest-ish money. I mean, that's a lot of money at any time for me personally with my wallet. But back then, $20,000 is a lot of money. $5,000's a little bit softer on your wallet. We come to Frederick,
$200,000,
and we ask for $200,000.
Yep.
And town's going to pay.
Town will eventually pay. Mayor William Cole had tried to buy for time throughout the morning. He'd heard those Union reinforcements coming in throughout the early morning hours. He had hoped that had the Federals been able to win here, the city wouldn't have to pay. But around 11 o'clock in the morning, as more Confederate infantry are being shifted south, as the fighting or the sounds of fighting increase around these fields, he is going to let Early know that he has talked with 5 separate banks and they have come up with the money. Now, Early is basically going to hear that he's getting paid and says, that's great, I've got a battle to fight. He rolls out. He's going to come out here to Best Farm, probably getting here around 11:30 in the morning. Now, by that point, Confederate forces, the commanders on the field, have already sent John McCausland's cavalry, cavalry brigade, about 1,200 troopers, down the Monocacy River to the west, trying to find another crossing point. And they would succeed in doing so at the Worthington-McKinney Ford. And it would be at that ford that we're going to head next.
So as we head over there, we'll wrap up the story about the ransom, because it's pretty cool, because the story of the ransom doesn't just end right here on July 9th, 1864. The banks, there are 5 of them here in Frederick that agreed to pay this ransom with very low interest rates. So it was very kind of them to do that. And the reality of this story is that it takes the banks to get paid back? Who ends up paying the banks back? I think this story lasts until the 21st century, Matt. Go ahead and clarify this for us.
Basically what happens is that from the time of the Civil War up into the modern era, every senator from Maryland had brought up to the federal government, to the federal Congress, aid or asking for aid for the citizens of Frederick, Hagerstown, and Middletown to help pay back these debts. That was never granted. And so it would be the citizens, through taxes and things, that eventually would pay the banks back, and that would not occur until 1951.
And with the interest that accrued, they didn't pay back $200,000. They paid back the equivalent of roughly $600,000. So 3 times what they invested into saving their city in 1864. Right. That is taking a bath on your investment.
A fairly reasonable interest rate for almost 100 years, though.
And I'll tell you, I'm pretty pumped. The city is here today still, so, worthwhile investment for a couple of local guys who live here. So so join us over on the Worthington-McKinney Ford. We'll see you guys in a few minutes, but this has been the opening stages of the battle that saved Washington, July 9th, 1864, Monocacy Junction.
Are you ready?